Discover the untold saga of King Behanzin, the fearless shark king of Dahomey, and his legendary Amazons, the only all-female army in modern history. This 40-minute deep dive unpacks how Behanzin fearlessly resisted French colonization, marshaled his elite women warriors, and fought a gripping and ultimately tragic last stand that reshaped a kingdom's destiny. Prepare for jaw-dropping battles, emotional turmoil, and a legacy that still resonates today. They called him Behanzin Hosu Boele, but the world would remember him simply as the Shark, a monarch crowned in the shadow of European conquest, with eyes like coals and a heart burning for his people. In an age when African kings signed away their kingdoms in trembling ink, Behanzin carved his defiance into the bones of empire. His symbol, a shark lunging through chaos, wasn't just metaphor, it was prophecy. The shark would circle, and when the invaders reached too far into Dahomey's waters, it would bite. The kingdom of Dahomey was no ordinary realm. It was a war machine disguised as a dynasty, ritualistic, proud, brutal, built by kings and sustained by blood. Its heartbeat was the royal court of Dahomey, where legends walked and fear ruled. Yet as the 19th century waned, the French tricolor cast an expanding shadow. Under the banner of civilization, the colonizers came armed with cannons and contracts. But Behanzin had something they didn't: the loyalty of a people ready to die before submission, and the fiercest female warriors history had ever seen. The Amazons of Dahomey, the Mino, were unlike any fighting force the world had witnessed. Not sidekicks, not shields, but blades sharpened by training, myth, and wrath. They fought not behind the king, but beside him, often ahead. Their chants could fracture resolve. Their discipline rivaled any European regiment, and when the shark called them to war, they marched barefoot through fire, machetes in hand, undaunted by the white gunpowder storms ahead. This is not just the story of a king. It is the true chronicle of a final stand, a defiance so profound it could not be erased by exile, musket fire, or colonial propaganda. From the jungles of Dahomey to the prisons of Martinique, Behanzin's roar echoes still. The French brought artillery. He answered with thunder. In the annals of resistance, his name has too often been footnoted, his legend buried beneath Eurocentric triumphalism, but no longer. What follows is a journey into courage and collapse, honor and heartbreak, and a people's final cry against the tides of empire. You've heard of Spartans and samurai. Now meet the Shark King of Dahomey and the women warriors who swore to guard his throne with their blood. This is the story they never wanted you to know, and once you hear it, you'll never forget it. Before he was a shark, he was a son. Born in 1844 as Prince Kondo, the 11th son of King Glel of Dahomey, Behanzin wasn't groomed for the throne. He seized it through sheer will. Dahomey's royal court was a crucible of power games and mystical rites, where succession wasn't just politics, but prophecy. After Glel's death in 1889, Kondo overcame rivals, manipulations, and foreign pressures to ascend. He was crowned Behanzin, meaning the egg of the world and the father of the shark. The message was clear. He was protector, creator, and destroyer. Behanzin's chosen emblem, the shark attacking a gunboat, wasn't just royal pageantry. It was a declaration of war. He believed Dahomey was surrounded by enemies, foreign merchants, spies, missionaries, and like a shark in bloodied water, he would strike without warning. This symbol adorned flags, royal drums, palace walls. The shark was ruthless. The shark didn't blink. The shark ruled the deep. And now it ruled Dahomey. Unlike many African rulers who sought appeasement through treaties or trade, Behanzin viewed diplomacy as a trap. He inherited not only a kingdom, but a warning. The French were not here to negotiate. They were here to consume. Previous kings had bartered coastal ports like Cotonou in desperation. Behanzin tore up these agreements. The land of Dahomey belongs to Dahomey, he declared. And with that, the countdown to war began. Inside his palace in Dahomey, Behanzin revived rituals that bound ruler to land and king to cosmos. His reign was marked by bold public ceremonies, ancestral veneration, and a tightening grip on the military class. He summoned war priests, rearmed the Dahomey army, and elevated the Amazons to new heights of prestige. His voice became law, his silence terror. He understood that to face France, he had to become a myth, not just a man. But Behanzin was not mad. He was not reckless. He was strategic. He fortified the interior, established a powerful secret police, and watched the coasts with predatory calm. He knew what was coming. While French colonialists underestimated him as another native chieftain, Behanzin studied them, played time like a flute, and waited for the precise moment to strike. Thus, in the heart of West Africa, under the shadow of imperial expansion, a new type of monarch emerged. Not a collaborator, not a vassal, but a warrior king who swore that his throne would be defended not with signatures, but with the blood of invaders. They were warriors by oath, not by ornament. Known to themselves as the Mino, meaning our mothers, these women were not mere bodyguards or background fighters. They were Dahomey's most elite soldiers, an iron phalanx of discipline, rage, and unshakable loyalty. In the West, they would be romanticized as Amazons. But the truth was far more terrifying. These women didn't just defy gender roles, they shattered them with steel. The path to becoming a Mino was brutal by design. Recruits were often teenage girls, orphans, runaways, or those chosen by the king himself. Once inducted, they surrendered family ties, marriage, and motherhood. Their new identity was the kingdom. Training was relentless. Climb thorned walls barefoot, scale trees with hands bound, sprint through forests carrying live prisoners, kill, do not hesitate. Mercy was weakness, and weakness had no place among the Mino. They learned to disembowel, to throw spears with lethal accuracy, to operate rifles and later cannons. And every night they chanted songs of war under moonlight, their voices echoing like war drums. Unlike European armies, the Mino blurred the line between soldier and symbol. They were sacred instruments of royal wrath. During palace rituals, they guarded the king with spears crossed, ready to die. In battle, they led the charge, while the men followed. Their presence alone sent waves of fear through enemies. Reports from French soldiers described them as incredible and possessed. Their eyes burned, their machetes dripped, and when they died with teeth bared and blades in hand. But their power wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Mino regiments were bound by ancestral spirits, oath blood pacts, and mystical tattoos. They carried fetishes, charms believed to make them invincible, and some even went into battle nude from the waist up, painted in white clay, daring bullets to find them. They were more than warriors. They were incarnations of divine fury. To face a Mino in war was to face death's avatar. Behanzin elevated them further. Under his reign, the Mino swelled to thousands. They were split into battalions with distinct roles: riflewomen, gunners, storm chargers, and they were paid, federal respected. In a world where women were often silenced, Behanzin handed them guns and said, "Speak with fire." So when the French came with their pith helmets and polished boots, expecting submission, they met the Mino instead. Women who did not flinch when shot. Women who slit throats in silence. Women who had been told since girlhood that dying for Dahomey was not sacrifice, It was destiny. In 1890, the waters between diplomacy and war boiled over. The spark, Cotonou, a key coastal trade hub rich with palm oil, seized years earlier by the French under false treaties. King Behanzin rejected the agreements outright. He declared Cotonou the sovereign property of Dahomey and sent warriors to reclaim it. In Paris, outrage followed. In Dahomey, drums of war sounded, and just like that, colonial arrogance met ancestral wrath. The French, confident in their superior firepower, underestimated their enemy. They saw Behanzin's troops as disorganized savages, unaware they were facing one of the most sophisticated African military structures of the era. On March 4th, 9,000 Dahomeyan warriors, including hundreds of Mino, attacked the French in Cotonou. The assault was ferocious. Warriors painted in death colors hurled themselves at enemy lines, wielding clubs, muskets, and bare fists. French soldiers recalled it as a nightmare, wave after wave of silent, fast-moving shadows that struck like lightning. But the most shocking scene came days later at the Battle of Achukpa. Dahomeyan forces stormed the French in open field. Their tactic was pure aggression: overwhelm, confuse, engulf. The Amazons led the front line, fearlessly charging fortified positions. Bullets tore through the air, bodies fell, but they kept advancing. One French commander noted that they came as if death could not reach them. It wasn't metaphor, it was truth. Yet the French had Gatling guns and fortified square formations. By modern warfare standards, Behanzin's forces were courageous, but outgunned. After hours of brutal fighting, the Dahomey army pulled back. The cost was staggering: hundreds dead, many of them Mino who had chosen to die rather than retreat. The French held their position. On paper, it was a French victory. In reality, it was a bloody warning. Dahomey would not fall easily. What made this war different was the psychological terrain. The French weren't just fighting an army. They were battling a belief system, a kingdom fused with faith, ritual, and identity. Each fallen Amazon was buried with honor, their names sung in royal lamentations. For every musket lost, a vow was made to reclaim it in blood. Behanzin didn't mourn defeat. He sharpened for the next round. The first war ended in a tense ceasefire. France kept Cotonou. Dahomey kept its dignity, barely, but neither side forgot the smell of the battlefield or the terror of what they'd seen. For France, it was a wake-up call. For Behanzin, it was only the opening act. Because he knew what they would do next. He knew the empire would return. And this time, it would bring everything. After the smoke cleared from Achukpa, King Behanzin did not sue for peace. He did not write letters of apology or request parley. He stood his ground and began to prepare for war on a scale Dahomey had never seen. He understood the French had not come to share Cotonou. They had come for all of Dahomey, and next time they would bring more than muskets. So Behanzin fortified his kingdom with the fury of a man who knew the walls were closing in. The ceasefire was a lie, a thin veil of diplomacy covering imperial ambition, while the French reinforced their coastal garrisons and brought in reinforcements from Senegal and Gabon. Behanzin rearmed his soldiers with smuggled rifles, trained his Amazons day and night, and sealed off Dahomey from foreign influence. Missionaries were expelled. European traders were monitored or disappeared. Loyalty became the kingdom's currency. The price for betrayal was death. He restructured his military into tighter, more aggressive units, leaning heavily on guerrilla tactics and sudden raids. Cannons captured from rival kingdoms were refurbished. Foreign blacksmiths were secretly contracted to forge new blades and ammo molds. Every village near Dahomey became a war camp. Every citizen was a potential spy or a soldier. The kingdom pulsed with tension, resolve, and rage. France, meanwhile, planned a full-scale invasion. They sent General Alfred Dodds, a seasoned commander of mixed African and French heritage, to lead an expedition into the interior. Dodds was given one mission: crush Behanzin's resistance and annex Dahomey into the French West African Empire. This would not be a limited campaign. It would be scorched earth. But Behanzin didn't flinch. He warned his people, "The land of Dahomey will not be given to foreigners. If they come again, we will meet them with fire, with teeth, with gods." And then, in a chilling move, he ordered his court to prepare for war rituals of finality, blood oaths, ancestral invocations, and sacrifices that declared Dahomey would not survive this war unchanged. And beneath it all, the Amazons waited, sharpening blades, loading guns, practicing death moves. Behanzin made one thing clear: there would be no negotiation, no compromise, no retreat. If the French wanted Dahomey, they would have to take it inch by inch, soaked in blood and smoke. This wasn't just prelude. It was warning, the last breath before a kingdom howled into its final battle. The Second Franco-Dahomeyan War began in July 1892, but it wasn't just a campaign, it was a cataclysm. French troops advanced inland from Cotonou with 2,500 men, Gatling guns, and artillery, but what they faced was a kingdom possessed by its gods, ruled by a king who had vowed never to kneel, and guarded by women who would rather be torn apart than captured. This wasn't war, it was defiance incarnate. At Dogba, the first major engagement, the French expected a swift victory. Instead, they were ambushed in thick bushland by hundreds of Amazon warriors. Moving like phantoms, the Mino emerged from the trees, with howling war cries, hurling grenades, and slashing through French ranks with curved machetes. French officers were stunned, not just by their skill, but by their fearlessness. Even when shot, Amazons kept coming, often crawling with blades in their teeth, striking at boots and throats. The French won the day, but lost their illusions. These weren't savages, these were soldiers. Next came Pogessa, a brutal confrontation in open fields. The Amazons stormed trenches, ripped through defenses, and died in waves. Yet their ferocity forced French columns to halt for days. A female commander was seen leading her battalion in white war paint, singing songs of death while charging a machine gun nest. When she was shot, her second-in-command picked up the blade, continued the charge, and nearly reached the French flag before being gunned down. Their bodies were stacked like barricades, their legacy immortal. But the most haunting battle was Aragon. There, the Mino fought in close quarters for hours. One French survivor wrote, "They did not scream, they did not plead. They killed like executioners and died like statues." Many Amazons deliberately engaged in suicidal attacks, leaping onto cannons to detonate explosives. Others feigned death, then rose and slit throats in the night. No soldier returned from Aragon untouched, physically or mentally. As Behanzin's forces retreated deeper inland, the French pressed on, but they were slowed by sabotage, traps, and relentless counterattacks. Mino regiments covered retreats, ambushed supply lines, and raided camps at night. Behanzin's strategy was brutal attrition. Bleed the invader dry, make every inch cost a soul. But the French had more men, more guns, and more resolve than anyone expected. Slowly the tide turned. Cities fell, villages burned, and yet the Mino kept fighting. By November, more than half of them had perished. Still they did not surrender. Some were captured and executed. Others vanished into the forests to fight on as insurgents. The war had become myth in real time. By the end of 1892, it was clear the Amazons of Dahomey were not immortal, but their courage was. They didn't just fight, they defined resistance. And even in death, they scorched the memory of every man who faced them. They were not ornaments of empire, they were its destroyers. By late 1892, the kingdom of Dahomey was bleeding. The once invincible Amazons had been reduced to scattered remnants, their commanders fallen, their regiments shattered. French forces, led by General Alfred Dodds, now marched toward the sacred capital of Dahomey, the spiritual and political heart of the kingdom. Every mile was lined with ash and corpses. Villages were torched, crops destroyed, and people displaced. Yet even in this twilight, King Behanzin refused to kneel. As the French drew closer, Behanzin took a final stand. He ordered the last of his loyal warriors, men and women, to defend the capital with everything they had. Ancient war drums thundered. Sacred symbols were repainted on palace walls. The king wore his war regalia not to inspire hope, but to declare, "I will not die a prisoner." But deep inside, he knew the end had come, not through defeat in battle, but through the sheer, relentless crush of empire. When Dahomey could no longer be held, Behanzin made a haunting decision. He ordered the city set ablaze. With his own hands, he torched royal palaces, shrines, and sacred art, so they would not fall into foreign hands. The flames consumed centuries of heritage. The night sky over Dahomey glowed red, a funeral pyre for a kingdom that refused to surrender its soul. The king fled into the forests with a small entourage, beginning a desperate guerrilla resistance. For nearly a year he evaded capture, launching ambushes and surviving on loyalty and legend. But with no foreign allies, no supplies, and his army reduced to embers, the end was inevitable. On January 15, 1894, King Behanzin, surrounded and betrayed by some of his own chiefs, surrendered not to France, but to fate. He was exiled first to Martinique, then to Algeria. The shark was caged. Far from the land he vowed never to give up. He spent the rest of his days in royal captivity. He grew a garden, taught his children, wrote letters in poetic defiance. Yet in every breath he mourned his homeland. His last words, it said, were not of vengeance, but of remembrance. "Tell my people the land still remembers them." Behanzin died in 1906, far from Dahomey, but never defeated in spirit. His bones lay in exile, but his soul roamed the fields of Dahomey. A king without a kingdom, a warrior without a war. Yet to his people and to history, he remained the last true king of Dahomey, the shark who would not be tamed. King Behanzin died in exile, but his defiance outlived his captors. In modern-day Benin, his name is whispered in reverence. Streets bear his title, statues stand in his honor, and school children are taught the story of the Shark King who burned his capital rather than surrender it. He is no longer seen as a relic of resistance, but as a symbol of dignity, identity, and unyielding pride in the face of imperialism. The Amazons of Dahomey, once dismissed as myth or propaganda, have surged back into global consciousness. Scholars now refer to them as one of the most elite fighting forces in African history. Films, novels, and documentaries highlight their ruthlessness, discipline, and sisterhood. They have inspired everything from comic books to global blockbusters, most notably the fictional Dora Milaje in Marvel's Black Panther, a clear homage to the real women who made empires tremble. But beyond pop culture, their resurgence has ignited important conversations. In West Africa, women's groups cite the Mino as proof that African feminism is not a Western import, but an indigenous legacy of leadership, power, and sacrifice. In academic circles, Behanzin and the Amazons challenge colonial narratives that paint African resistance as chaotic or feudal. This was not madness. It was strategy, love of land, and political genius, all wrapped in ceremonial cloth and scarred knuckles. Artifacts stolen from Dahomey still sit in European museums, thrones, sacred statues, even royal heirlooms. But the fight to repatriate these treasures has intensified. Activists and historians argue that true justice means returning more than history. It means restoring dignity. Behanzin's voice lives on in this struggle, a voice that once declared, "My kingdom is not for sale. My ancestors are not for show." In Benin, the royal palaces of Dahomey have been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Efforts are underway to digitize and preserve the oral histories of the Amazons and royal lineage. Descendants of Behanzin still live, some working in politics, others as cultural custodians. The Shark King's bloodline, though displaced, has not disappeared, and so more than a century after the cannons fell silent, Behanzin still roars. The Amazons still march. Their legacy is not dust, but flame, passed from one generation to the next, not as folklore, but as a living challenge. What would you do when your land is threatened? When your culture is erased? When history forgets your name? Because they didn't just fight for Dahomey. They fought so that we would remember, and now you do.